Good morning. Today I'll do Escaping the Matrix Part 6, and I'll do the second part of a Matrix movie metaphors. So first metaphors I was talking about before was the initial, catching these whisperings of something greater in reality that we're being told isn't really real. It's kind of real. It's real in some ways, but there's a lot more reality. So we hear these whisperings. Neo saw something on the internet that didn't make sense, a message given to him directly that said, follow the white rabbit. So we all get these whisperings all the time. This is what people talk about when they see synchronicities, or they have a spirit guide or an animal guide, or they see a message from a butterfly or a bird. Basically, it's the fact that everything is real. Nothing is fake. There's degrees of accuracy, and there's the way that things are accurate, but everything is alive and connected and real. So if we look at the nature of reality in one place, we're going to see the same patterns as other places. And again, I could have a whole, hours and hours just talking about the science behind fortune telling. This is mathematics. A mathematician can explain fortune telling better than anyone else can, because they can describe how it relates to the nature of numbers and how numbers are infused in everything, and how when an observer interacts with numbers in real time, it creates this dynamic where we have access to, the universe this way. Anyways, it's not about seeing magic that everyone else doesn't see. It's about getting really familiar with how everything works and just starting to notice these more finite details. Anyway, so escaping the matrix, the metaphors of tearing yourself loose, finding the whisperings of reality that we want to follow and figure out what that means, tearing ourselves loose from the tubes, from the machinery, realizing that everybody is mean all around us, because the Matrix produces people that are mean and conditions people to be mean, and then punishes people if they're not mean. It's very, very confusing system. Scarcity consciousness is imprinted onto us, so we escape the Matrix. We tear out all those tubes, and the first thing we do when we tear out all those tubes, I was talking about this last episode, is that we get a lot of Mr. Smiths coming after us right away. They're like, hey, a second, you just exited the Matrix. You just ripped yourself out of the emotional control system. You're trying to regain your sovereignty. We do not allow free beings in this slave system. So we, again, must learn to create boundaries that allow us to remain free and not get trapped up in that emotional slavery. Especially in relationships. There's this unconscious desire to have control in a relationship, and this is done through the emotional body. And so the sooner we can recognize the struggle and disengage, and only seek relationships with people, friends, and romantic and business, even if we can, who don't engage in that kind of behavior, who aren't looking for a one-up on someone else, who aren't looking for a way to have control over someone, who see a business as a way to perform teamwork and don't see it as a slave factory. And virtually everyone has been taught to see a business as a slave factory. You own a business, you have slaves, you pay them as little as you can get away with, and you take as much profit as you can from them. This is considered success. This is in the alternative communities, in the conscious communities. This is still how they're defining success. I went to a conscious business conference. They didn't speak a single thing about consciousness. Zero. Everybody that got up on stage and talked about how wonderful the program was, all they were saying is how much money they made. So there's virtually no crossover into the conscious community right now. There is virtually no consciousness in the quote-unquote conscious community. There isn't a conscious community. There are us who are awakening and are sharing our stories of awakening and are promoting other people awakening. There is no conscious community. The conscious community is a lie. The conscious community, I'm not going to say it's just all complete fake. It's like the Bible or other sacred texts. Were originally channelings from very high sources, but then when people saw how powerful they were, they started changing the language and manipulating and changing it. So the conscious community has very quickly been co-opted by devil worshippers, people who worship the suffering of others and who want to control others. I'm just going to make that translation really quickly right now. Anyone who, when we're referring to the devil or the darkness or the shadows or the demons, we're all talking about the same thing. It's unconsciousness. It's greed. It's apathy. It's lack of empathy. It's seeking to control others. It's enjoying other people's suffering. It's all talking about the same thing. So anyways, safe boundaries, because these are just going to be popping up everywhere. And at first, we can pretty much only run away until we develop really high-level skills. You see Neo running away constantly. You see the whole troop running away constantly. Like, fuck it, we can't win this battle. Let's run. Their whole life is running and hiding and trying to, form a resistance, trying to grow their numbers and trying to have an effect while running away all the time. and then they get some high-level training. So what we can be doing is practicing alchemy. Alchemy is emotional transmutation. It's where we take a negative feeling and we love it and we learn it and we become it and we release it. We have a tangible practice. If we don't have a tangible practice, practice a tangible practice. Get better at it. Go to someone, find someone who can teach you more about it if you're not feeling like you're being very successful. But being able to free ourselves from these emotional bonds, these emotional slave marks, these emotional chains, this is what Bob Marley talks about. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. He's saying, well, yeah, of course, if we're locked in an economic system that's forcing our hand, then we are, but our minds are our own, and we can free ourselves independently of our physical condition. We can become free in our own reality and still be forced to live, in a mechanical, physical slave world to a certain degree. Emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. He's not talking about physical slavery, although there is that component. So all we have to really do is hold this goal higher than anything else, and it'll become a reality. And ways we do this are, again, running away from situations that we know are toxic, just not engaging in them, and practicing alchemy skills, because once we get to the point where we can have someone try to cause us emotional harm, say something to make us feel bad, say something to manipulate us, say someone to try to control us, and we can smile and integrate it. We can have empathy for the fact that this person is very unconscious and very much in pain and trying to direct their pain somewhere else, or hasn't woken up and is living blindly inside a slave factory, and we can have empathy and compassion for them. We can have strong boundaries and not let it get to us, not open ourselves up in the situation where we're going to allow it to get to us, not take these people seriously. All they do is act out bad behavior and have little lucid periods of consciousness in between acting out bad behavior, so we can absolutely not let these people have the opportunity to speak with us if we can, or just shut down and not listen to anything they say. So we can really have strong boundaries. We can also learn what incites the mob, and we can be very delicate around this. We're not going to say and do things that are going to incite the mob. We're not going to say things which are going to call Mr. Smith to us, because we're going to be smart. We're going to learn what these things are, and we're not going to do them anymore. This is a fine line, because we're going to be genuine still. We're going to seek to have a positive impact by showing a better way. We're going to continue to do that, and we're going to continue to take a little bit of heat for that, but we're going to find the things that are trigger words, and we're just not going to say those trigger words. We're going to be smart, and we're going to find a different, more intelligent way to go about it. Because if we repeat trigger words and Mr. Smith is coming at us all the time, we're not going to make much progress. We're just going to be running away all the time, basically, just fighting for survival. So we want to blend in just enough where we can actually make a difference. So at this point, when we get better at boundaries and not inciting the mob and using trigger words and doing some alchemy so we're not getting offended when people are mean to us, then we can start dodging bullets. This is the metaphor of when Neo realizes he can dodge bullets. When he realizes he can freeze time, what this metaphor is talking about is when someone is real-time insulting, trying to control us, we can real-time have empathy for them, detach ourselves from it, love them for being where they're at and doing the best they can, which might be horrible. Recognize we are from a higher ability, that we have a higher state of consciousness, and detach ourselves and watch these things. Be the observer. Watch this bullet come at. Time doesn't exist in this state of someone is trying to be mean to me, get an emotional reaction from me to control me. I can detach myself. I'm stopping time as I detach myself. I'm pulling myself out of this emotional pattern, this emotional swing, this intensity of emotion. I'm detaching myself, but I'm stopping time. It's the metaphor right there. And then from this detached state where I'm still loving and curious, I'm detached and loving and curious, I can look at the bullet. I can examine the mechanism of the anger. I can see where it's coming from. I can look at its angles. I can see how it might come from a childhood wound. I can see how I might have a similar childhood wound. So this is me stopping time, looking, coming up as Neo does to the bullet, looking up close, touching it, tapping it. It drops out of the sky because when we realize that these things are unconscious patterns that we can deprogram from ourselves and no longer be emotionally attached to ourselves, then they don't really bother us anymore. Then we can freeze time fairly easy. We get better and better at freezing time in more and more intense situations and just stepping out of the way of the bullets. or knocking them, picking them out of the air. Again, this seems like incredible magic when it's on the movie, but it's a direct metaphor, a direct process, an emotional, it's a process of how we deal with emotions using our higher brain function. So again, I'll just touch on this briefly, that using our higher brain function is how we escape the Matrix. The Matrix is designed to keep us locked into our most simplistic forms of brain function. The whole, we only use 2% of our brain or 10% of our brain, that's what the Matrix wants. That's why they tell us that. They tell us that we can only use a small part of our brain, and that only a few brilliant people can use larger parts of their brain. This is slavery. We can all use all of our brain. It's called practice. We can do whatever we want. We have these amazing bodies, nervous systems, which are energetic bodies, electrical systems. Part of our being is electrical. Our nervous system is electrical. Our brain is electrical. So we have energetic bodies, and our energetic body is more of who we are than our physical body, because it's what controls our impulses and our thoughts and our feelings. It's everything that we know of. It's how we express ourselves in our higher functions. Our biological functions are fairly simplistic and mechanical, whereas our electrical systems have access to this great beyond. Okay, so dodging bullet metaphor. This is essentially the highest form of metaphor in the book, because once we learn that we are actively attacking ourselves, that no one is actually externally attacking us, yes, they are in a finite sense, but in reality, the trouble that we experience when other people attack us externally is that internally we haven't gotten to a point of perfection around that issue, because once we internally get to a point of perfection around this issue, it's not going to bother us anymore externally at all. It might be rude and inconsiderate, and we might still choose to not be around these people, and we might still choose to have better boundaries, but it's probably not really going to affect us much anymore. It's not going to be a trigger for us. It's just going to be, oh God, more of this. I don't really want to do more of this right now, rather than, oh, this hurts, and now I have to process this and get rid of this, because now I have this whole emotional, someone was mean to me and I need to let go of this. So when we get to that point, we don't have to go through this process of dissolving all the bad things that were done to us, because we have such deep awareness and empathy for that dynamic that we are the father and the mother of that dynamic, and we consciously choose to be conscious parents and allow it to be as it is without getting attached to it. And again, there's a big gap in between the words not being attached to something and letting go of something, and the physical process, the mechanical process, the energetic process of identifying these tangles and releasing them. So this is alchemy. So this episode on movie matrix metaphors is really revolving around empathy, stopping the bullets and dodging the bullets, running away when we can, and when we're able to fight, when we're able to dissolve with empathy, when we're able to hold space, when we are able to know that we are the higher power in the situation, and thus hold space, allow someone else to act out their bad behavior, and it doesn't get to us, and we allow them to go through everything that they can think of and all of their tantrums and all of their fits and all of their unconscious emotional bodies, when we can just be there and smile at them and say, yes, this is the human experience. We can listen attentively. We don't need to perform active listening. We don't need to confirm anything that's being said. We don't want to do that, but we can just hold space for it and allow people to go through all their processes, smiling and being gentle, and then jumping in when there's a pause and creating a solution to the problem, redirecting to the solution. Because if someone is able to express all of their problems and all of their difficulties, and it doesn't get to us emotionally, this is psychology. They unconsciously have been defeated. They have defeated themselves by playing all of their cards and having none of their cards be of any value. Then all of a sudden, whatever we say back to them, as long as it's really soft, gentle, and kind, they've played all their cards. They don't have anything to defend against. They have no natural defense mechanisms left. They have played themselves out. So this is the moment of truth where we can have a strong effect. If it's with someone who's highly unconscious, I would not plan on this being a repeated thing. I would not plan on getting easier anytime, because this whole process is unconscious for people that are still asleep. So we really need to choose our battles, figure out where it's really important, and decide we want to go through all of this. Or even better, if we're helping someone who has decided they want help becoming self-aware, This is the process that we use to help other people become self-aware. We hold space for their disbelief, and we just gently reflect back to them that this is their process, and that we are assisting them in seeing their process so that they can become self-aware, and that we are essentially trying to be as neutral and loving as possible. Being neutral is the best thing we can do, because allowing people to be themselves is about all we can do. And listen for those moments, those right moments where we can say something that's going to be of great importance, because the Matrix trains people to not let anything in. The Matrix tries to take up all of our being. The beginning of the movie, again, we're all in this giant machinery, locked into these little alcoves with all these tubes in us and all this machinery around us. So we are not awake. So even if we bring out lucid moments in sleepers where they have a greater sense of themselves in reality, as soon as we leave, we are their portal vector. We are a vector, a source that is a portal to another world. We are showing them a reality that they do not experience regularly. So as soon as we leave, as soon as we drop that space, not even if we're still there, but we're not creating that field for them, then they're just going to fall back into full unconsciousness. They're still locked into the machinery and the tubes. So if we tell people, look how we can all get along and create a better reality, and then we stop saying that, and they get to think their own programmed thoughts, they're not actually consciously thinking. Their old recirculating thoughts are recirculating again. The slave programming tells them that all that was a lie, and then they feel this big disconnect. They're like, wait a second, I saw this reality that someone portaled in for me. I kind of believe in it. It kind of makes a lot more sense, but then I'm going back to my old slave programming. Now I have a dichotomy. So people that are unawakened, when they're faced with reality, it creates a dichotomy. I saw a Facebook post on this the other day, that just an infographic that was really clear, simple and clear on this. So people then want to blame us because they have a dichotomy. Then they want to blame the truth because there's a dichotomy. People have difficulty coming to terms with the dichotomy because they're taught to. We don't have problems with, okay, I'm going to quickly go into the nature of paradox. Paradox is the limitation of the human mind. It has nothing to do with the limitation of reality. Physics doesn't have a problem with paradox. We have a problem with paradox. Physics exists. Our interpretations is questionable. So people, when they have this paradox dichotomy, the best thing we can do is not control it, because mind control loves to control dichotomy, loves to confuse people. Banks love to do this. When you go into a bank, they want to sign you up with a program. They try to confuse you to no end and then get you to sign up for something that you have no idea what you're signing up for. This is standard manipulative tactics. So in this dichotomy, we want to simply say, look, this is my reality. This is what I live and breathe. This is what I experience. Yes, I went through your stages of disbelief. Yes, I was controlled by the Matrix at first. Yes, it's a little bit much all at once, but just take your time with it. Look for evidence. Do your own research. DYOR. This is so important, to do your own research. And I'm going to go back to the FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So when we are looking to help other people escape from the Matrix that are ripe for this, we want to point out the fact that there is no need to recirculate fear, uncertainty, and doubt when we can move on to curiosity. Curiosity allows us to move forward, and the Matrix tells us to be stuck in fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So this is why when we bring higher states of consciousness to sleepers, this is why they have so attached to the dichotomy. They're so angry and attached to the fact that they were right, that we are wrong, that there is a right or wrong between the two sets of information. We can just say, hey, what about curiosity? Why is there a need to prove and disprove? What happened to collecting data? What happened to collecting data for 6 months or 2 years before making any kind of observations? We don't need to make observations on our data. Being able to collect information being able to observe without having an opinion is a higher form of intelligence. There's another great quote from Facebook. So we don't have to draw conclusions from our data. We can endlessly draw data. And every once in a while we can say, okay, I need to draw upon this data for a situation to get some more information. And then we can make individual judgment calls and individual decisions for that moment that are not indicative of our future decisions. This is called drawing upon our data and not being dependent on having an answer all the time. Again, the Matrix tells us we have to have an answer all the time. Just this moment, I don't know, my mobile phone company flashed up a message that says, make sure to get your flu shot. I'm on a live stream and I've got my mobile phone company telling me to go inject myself with chemical. Okay. So yeah, another thing that we can avoid injecting ourselves with things that we don't know what's in them. I don't want to go too far into this, but generally, we've existed fine for thousands of years without injecting things into us, and the things that are in there are fairly questionable. I'm all for good health, and I'm all for being healthy and safe, and for not spreading disease, but I think that the greater part of being healthy is recognizing what health is, and not being in fear and injecting ourselves. I mean, we know that we have forms of antibiotics that are natural, that are highly effective. We know we have things that can help us in many different ways, and that we don't have to believe what a TV and what a doctor who works for a slave medical system says. Now, I'm not saying these doctors are necessarily bad or wrong. I'm saying that they went to 8 years or more of schooling, which trained them in a lot of lies. They learned how to do some good things, but they're really isolated in their awareness. The mainstream medical community is very finite in its training. I highly suggest that if you're going to work with the mainstream medical community, because you have to, because that's what is available, because they're highly specialized in some things, they're really good at some things, like, physical surgery, they're amazing at, and sanitation, they're pretty good at, but balance it out with something else, because they don't know anything about holistic health. They will thrash people's bodies, they will tear people's bodies to pieces, and then be like, this person's symptoms are getting worse, we don't know why. We just thrashed them to pieces. We injected them and put them in a horrible environment, and fed them bad food, and didn't allow them regular access to friendly people, and now they're doing worse. I wonder what went wrong, So we absolutely, if we're going to be engaging in the system, we want support systems. Most of us have day jobs, or a lot of us. Starseeds generally don't want a day job because it's hard to be around matrix enslaved people all the time, but if we're in a day job, or even if we service customers who are not awakened, we really need to have these balance. So if we're going to see the medical mainstream community, then we're going to want to find an alternative healer who's going to help us balance out our holistic health, every other aspect of our body and our being, and same with information, and same with processing. If we're around people that are unconscious a lot, we're going to want to find these conscious people we can be around them, talk with them, experience with them, feel with them. It doesn't matter so much as who we spend time with is who we become more of. This is one of these psychological principles that all the think tank experts have come up with, which is basic science. What we are around affects us, and we affect. It's very simple. So we want to make sure that we are balancing out all this craziness from the Matrix with people who are also awake. So again, Neo finds his band, his tribe, and he sticks with them. He doesn't wake up and then say, I'm going to do this by myself. He's like, there's not many of us awake. We better stay together. I have no idea what I'm doing. I just woke up. I'm absolutely going to follow my little band here and do what they say, because they woke me up, and they seem to know what they're doing. They have routines that help them. I'm going to learn from those routines. So the first thing we can do is plug into a conscious community where we're getting these successful routines. Right now, there's a lot of them. So another great way that we can exit the Matrix, there was that sweet old woman who was teaching that class in that apartment building, these little kids bending spoons with their minds, and she's answering his questions. This is the archetypal study of deeper natures of reality. So it's the mystery schools in Egypt, it's the ancient schools in Greece, it's been around the world. The seat of power and education has changed in different places around the world at different times, but this actually exists within us. We can create this magical learning space within us. All we have to do is suspend our disbelief and start studying. Facebook is full of brilliant, magical people right now. I was first introduced to a group called Real Angels, and it's an amazing group. These are really genuine people that see farther into nature reality and see how they can be supportive of other people waking up. This is the primary mission of this group. It's very genuine. I know a lot of groups aren't that genuine, or have varying degrees of genuinity, or more about the social aspect and having fun, but this group, and there's many others out there, this is just a large one with over 20,000 people, they're really focused on not just spreading the memes and the positive vibes, but there's mentorships being taken on. So when we enter these groups, we have valuable resources. When we have questions, all of a sudden there's someone we can ask questions of, we can get support from. These are questions we might have that we might typically have looked for a priest, a minister, a friend, a parent to help us answer, but now we're doing it for a higher state of consciousness. So people who are less conscious than us all of a sudden don't have any more information, probably have less information than we do, because people in higher states in these other areas are probably in a lower state of actual self-awareness because they bought into another system more. It's much more difficult to choose to want to learn self-awareness if we're being reinforced as being successful with what we're doing otherwise. So starseeds often don't find success early in life. They often find confusion because we're trying to find ourselves. We've realized that it's more important to reclaim ourselves than it is to find a way to buy into the system as the system is. So one way that we can really be effective is by plugging into these networks, creating these networks, these magic education centers, these learning magic, studying magic. There's an actual class taught by a Native American in my area who teaches this kind of stuff. It's amazing. If you can ever find someone who teaches anything that sounds really crazy and out there, past life regression, or seeing into other realms, or remote viewing, any of these subjects that sound fantastical, if you know someone in your area who's teaching a class on it, see if you can get a drop-in or an intro class to it. See how legit it is. See how real it feels. Because there are some people doing really genuine work in this area, and it's really amazing. The teacher in this area, his classes are between, sliding scale, $20 to $200 per class. And what he's saying is that this information is so valuable, high-level, top-level information, it's worth $200 for a 2-hour class. But he knows that no one's going to pay that. He knows that, people don't have people in this community typically don't have lots of extra money to throw around. And, so he's going to accept $20 as a token. He's going to say, okay, I can actually pay my rent with that. But, this is someone who's masterful, and, he could be making tens of thousands of dollars every time he spoke if he was just concerned with money. But he's concerned with reaching people that will actually benefit from his message. So he's teaching to the audience that's going to be effective. But again, what he says over and over again is, you see how this classroom is pretty empty and there's only a dozen of us. So this high level information, there should be packed full. This whole class should be packed full. So this is the reality we want to be bringing forth, is filling up our classrooms, creating the classrooms and filling them up, expanding the dialogue. Another thing that he talks about and that I'm a big fan of is direct teaching. I don't teach little steps of how to get there. I don't teach package programs where I show people a couple little pieces and then I move on to the next couple pieces. I try to show the whole dynamic, and then I try to dive in and try to make it real in different ways, and I try to translate it into different people's languages. But I do not subscribe to the concept that I need to start really simplistic and slowly work my way up, because I know there are people that know this stuff already. We know this already. It's part of our past life memories. It's in the Akashic record, so we need to be reminded of it. So as we're listening to this, we'll probably say, oh yeah, I know that. I don't know how I know that, but now I know more about this. I just heard Alex say this, and now I know even more than he was saying because I remember it. because in this lifetime we heard something about it and we're putting the pieces together. Or maybe because intuition tells us. Intuition draws us. And when our intuition is drawing us, compelling us in a way that's very strongly like this, it's probably because we already know it from past life. Our source code has experienced this so many times that this is a greater part of reality, and just because we haven't experienced in this incarnation doesn't stop us from still knowing it. Our being knows it and wants it. The Facebook meme of information seeks us. We don't seek information. So this is a great concept of how concepts and awarenesses want to find places where they can manifest, and we have a play in this, in the fact that we are multidimensional beings. And again, we're getting really meta right here, but we can keep it at the fact that we can receive information. Marcus Aurelius, Tesla, Einstein, the information comes from the cosmos. It doesn't come from here locally. It doesn't come from my electrical system. It doesn't come from my biological body. It comes from the ether. It's all out there, and we learn how to observe the ether and reality and try to put it into words that we can describe. So we exit the matrix and we see how the movie relates to reality by looking at every detail and by being curious and by being loving and having empathy and setting boundaries. It's all the same list of things. Basically, we are trying to help ourselves and show that we are helping ourselves to other people, so that other people can say, hey, yeah, we're helping ourselves. We're doing the best I can. There's no one person that just says, okay, I've got this all. I've got a clean path. I know what I'm doing. I'm done. Every once in a while, someone unlocks a great
a great key to enlightenment, and they become in a perpetual state of increasing enlightenment with nothing interrupting this. So these are the people that are on their fast track to mastery. So Eckhart Tolle, various swamis, these are people who have reached a state of perpetual enlightenment. This does not mean that they've just snapped over and become perfect. We ascend with who we are. We don't become instantly perfect once we reach a state of continual enlightenment. Continual enlightenment just means that every single moment we're directing our attention to more consciousness. Every single moment. We're not slipping up at all. If we slip up, we're getting right back on top of it. But this does not mean we have infinite wisdom. It means we have access to infinite wisdom. So people that are highly enlightened still have blind spots. People that are masters are not infallible. They absolutely have flaws. And if we have a relationship with the people that are masterful, we can talk about this with them, and they will readily admit where their blind spots are, and they seek to expand their consciousness. People who don't seek to expand their consciousness probably aren't really in a perpetual state of expanding their consciousness. But in reality, when we make these hurdles, when we align our chakra system and our energetic body to reach a higher state of consciousness, it doesn't mean we got 100%. We can do 70%. We don't have to get all the way there and to reach higher states of consciousness. It means we still have more work to do, and it means that it'll get easier and we'll get more potent the more work we do. All right, I have to get going, but this was part 2 of Matrix movie metaphors on my ongoing series of how we exit the Matrix. Hope you have a wonderful morning.